When you work with Excel and formulas, it's almost inevitable that at some point, formulas that contain only basic math like add, subtract, multiply, divide, just are not going to be what you need. And even when you try to add in some of the more popular functions, say sum or average, those aren't quite what you need either. And so at some point, chances are you're going to need to set up a function that includes some sort of logical conditions. So if I do this, then this is what's going to happen in my spreadsheet. And so we are going to look today at if, and then its close relatives, SumIF and CountIF. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and let's look at the if functions. As I look at our example spreadsheet today, I can see that, well, we are on a team of some kind, and we have had a whole season. We have 16 weeks where we've played a game, and we've recorded our scores and, of course, our opposing team scores. But I can't really easily tell where we have a win. And so I could subtract and kind of come up with a difference between our score and their score, but I want to make it stand out a little bit more, and to do that, I'm going to use if. So I'm going to click in D3, and then above the ribbon, I'm going to go to the fourth tab, which is Formulas. Now, I have two ways to figure out the formulas, but I happen to know that if is a logical function. So I'm going to click in the drop down for logical, and then I'm going to go with if. Now, if arguments have three pieces. Basically, we set up some sort of a logical test. Sometimes we just say, are the cell contents this number or this text? Sometimes we use math to figure out what that logical test is. But whatever the test is, we then need to decide in this if formula what happens if that answer is true and what happens if it is false. Well, let's start with our logical test. So for our logical test, we want to say, all right, so if our score here in week 1 is larger than the opposing team's score in week 1, what is the value? Well, we're going to say, ooh, we won. So because I'm going to put in text, I need to put quotes around it. If I were doing some sort of a math answer, I wouldn't need the quotes. All right, now the value if false, I just want to add in a blank space. I don't really want to put in a message like lost, because I think win and lost both in the same column is just hard to read. So let's just put in a blank space. Now to put in a blank space, we're going to put quote, space with the space bar on my keyboard, and then quote again. And I should get some sort of an answer here. Even over at the right, it tells me that B3 is not larger than C3, so that's false. So it's going to come down to the false answer, and then it shows me right here in this lower section what the answer is going to be. Now also in this dialog box before we leave it, it reminds you what the formula does. So it checks whether a condition is met. It returns one value if it's true and another value if it's false. Well, we're going to say, okay. We knew that we were going to have a loss for this first game, and so it's blank. Now, as I rest my mouse on the fill handle, that little box in the lower right of the cell, I can click and drag down, copy my formula. I can very easily see which games we won. Wow, that is just amazing, isn't it? Of those games that we want, I want to see where we had at least a 10-point spread. So again, in E3, I can go back up to logical and come down to if. And again, I need to put in a logical test. So my test is B3 minus C3 because I want to know the difference. And I want to know if that is larger than 10. If you're at all uncomfortable with how this works, you might even want to put parentheses around the math part, if that's a little easier for you to see. Now, what is the value if it's true? Well, if we have more than a 10-point spread, we're going to say this is just amazing. But again, if the value is false, I don't really have anything that I want to put, so I'm just going to put quote, space, quote, and put in a blank. Well, we'll click OK, and we already know that this is not a win, so it's also not amazing. But now let me find the fill handle, click and drag down. And we have 3 games where we have at least a 10-point spread. So here, oh my goodness, 42 to 10, 54 to 34, so that was a 20-point spread, and 27, that's a 13-point spread. So these are amazing wins. Now let's switch gears a little bit and look at a really short list of an event and the people who are invited to attend. And it could even be a company event, and so this could be several hundred or even several thousand names, but we're just looking at a short example of what we could do. And for this really fancy event, in column A, of course, we have the employee's name, but then in column B, we have asked them to RSVP. And the Y means that, yes, they have in fact responded in some fashion. If there's a blank, it means that we still have not heard from them, and we're hoping that they are going to let us know if they are going to come or not. But in the meantime, it's just a blank for the RSVP. We could put an in there for no, but the blank serves the same purpose, and it keeps our spreadsheet a little cleaner. To the right of that, in column C, then, we're writing down their response. So we do have a Y for yes and an N for no, because we still have the blank for those who haven't responded. And then they were allowed to bring a +1. So in column D, if they are coming, are they going to bring a guest? Well, if they are, that guest name has been requested because we'll give them some sort of identification. But along with that, we have made it fairly clear that to defray some of our expenses, the guest will also have a charge attached. So hopefully our person that we've invited is also including that $10 fee. But we need to say, yes, they have paid that $10 fee, and they may even decide to make a partial payment. So we are recording their payments, and if there are any kind of comments that we need to attach to the particular person and their guest, we have comments in column H. So let's start in column B, where we just want to know if people have responded with an RSVP. And if they've responded, keep in mind that they've added in a Y. And we want to just find out how many. Anytime you want to find how many, that is a count. So we are going to go to formulas above the ribbon. And as we look at this function library, formulas for a CountIF are a little harder to find. So we're going to click on the drop down here for more functions. And they actually reside in the statistical group. So I'm going to go from statistical and kind of slide down here where we have a whole lot of count-related kinds of functions, but here is CountIF. And the first question here is, well, what's the range? What cells are we going to be looking at? And I'm just going to click and drag over B2 through B11. And then what is the criteria? Well, we want to know if they have responded with RSVP, and that means a Y in that column. It's text, so I'm going to put in quotes a Y. And we even get a preview here over at the right that even gives our number, but we'll click OK. And so it says that out of the 10 employees that we have contacted and asked to respond, 8 have responded. The next piece here is to move over to C12 and determine if they will attend and how many yeses do we have and how many no's do we have. Now that I've clicked in C12, let's count if the person who has been invited will actually attend. So again, we will go up to the tabs above the ribbon, go to formulas, and then because we did use it before, let's see if it's in recently used. And yes, it is here at the top, CountIF. And what is our range? Well, our range, and I'm just going to click and drag, is C2 through C11. Now, what is the criteria? What are we looking for? Well, in this instance, we're going to type a quote, a Y, and a quote because we're looking for how many people have said yes first. And we'll click OK. And it says 6. Well, let's also come down then to C14 and look for who has said no. So we can go back up to recently used, CountIF. What is the range? Well, it's actually the same range, C2 through C11. And what is our criteria? Well, it's quote, in quote, and we'll click OK. And so of the 8 people who have responded, we have 6 who will attend and 2 who won't. Now keep in mind, if we only have 10 people who we've invited, it's easy enough to sit here and count the Y's and the N's. If you have 100 people, well, it becomes a little more complicated, doesn't it? So now we know who will attend. Well, let's also then, in D12, practice by looking to see who is going to bring a guest. And again, we're just going to simply count if we have a Y for the guest, seeing here that some people are not. Well, let's go with recently used, CountIF. Our range this time is D2 through D11. What is the criteria? Well, we're just going to look for the Y's, and that's in quotes, the Y's. Click OK. And so even though we have 6 people who will attend, only 5 are bringing guests. When I originally set up this spreadsheet, I added in an if statement. So let me show you how that worked. In column F, I looked at the fact that we had people who were coming and who were bringing a guest. And if they were bringing a guest, I wanted to keep track of that total so that I could compare what I should have against what I might have received. So in F, I said, well, you know what? If, and this time I'm going to type it. So equals if. And then it even shows me here in a little drop down that if checks whether a condition is met, and it returns one value if true and another if false. But I'm just going to simply start typing it. So if. Now, the function is if, but the argument for the function must be in parentheses. So I'm going to put in a parentheses. And now it even gives me a better idea of what I need to put in. Well, the first thing is a logical test. So I'm looking to see if they're bringing a guess. So if, in this case, D2 equals, and then I'm going to put in quotes, Y, then as the pattern shows me here, I need to put in a comma, and then I need to put in the value if true. Well, the value if true is $10. So I'll type that in, and I've completed that one. So now it shows me that I need to add another comma, and I need to put in a value if false. So I could put in a 0, or I could put in just a blank. And I think really just the blank will work. So I'm going to put in quote, space, quote. I have a parentheses here between the function and the argument. So I also need to have a corresponding ending parentheses here at the end of this function. And then I'm going to go to the check mark and place it in. And it says that Jason Singleton is coming as a guest, so Fanny Adams owes $10. And then I'm going to find the fill handle, click and drag down, and I've already put in a formula here in F12 that simply adds this column. So it's telling me that I should have $50 on hand. Well, then let's look at column G, which shows me what our guests have actually paid for their guests. Well, there's a 10, there's a 10, there's a 5. So what I want to find out is how much of the money that I've collected actually pays for complete fees. So I'm going to come to G12. What am I doing? I'm adding numbers. I'm not counting them, but I'm adding them. So what I want to do is a SumIF. And let's go to the insert function because I'm not sure where SumIF is in the function library. So let's go to insert function. And it says, well, let's search for a function. And I'm going to say I want to add if, and let's go to go, and it gives me a list of potential functions down at the bottom. So as I scroll through, I see sum, but I need an if too. So SumIF adds the cells specified by a given condition or criteria. That's what we want. We're going to say OK. So what is the range? Well, the cells that we want to find to add to get this particular total are in G2 through G11. What is the criteria? Now this is kind of crazy. I only want to find the ones that have $10. And then we'll click OK. And so even though I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who have paid, one made a partial payment, so I know that I only have $40 from people who have paid the complete amount. As I look at columns F and G, I realize that while column F says what the fee is for a guest and what is owed, and then in column G, I have whether the fee has been paid or not, or even if a partial fee has been paid. And I would really like to make sure that if there is a partial fee, that I can somehow put that into the comments. So it's just easier to find overall. Well, my problem is if I don't have some sort of a value here in column F, then I'm having kind of a difficulty figuring out how I can write an if statement that will be correct. So what I need to do is come back over to F, and where we said, okay, if D2 is a Y, they owe $10. And that's the true statement. But if they don't owe, I think I'm not going to put in that blank like we started with, but I'm going to say, you know what? They owe 0. And then I'm going to click on the check mark and find the fill handle and drag it down. Now, in the long run, it doesn't really change anything in this column, except now, when I come over to H2 and I say equals if, and I'm just going to type it this time. Because I have my function here, then I need to add the argument in parentheses, so I'll add in my beginning parentheses. What's my logical test? F2 minus G2. So if I know they owe 10 and they have paid 10, I'm going to say that equals 0. Then what is the value? If it's true, I'm going to say, hey, we're good. If it is false, well, we'll add in a comma, and we're going to put in quotes, partial payment. And then, because we have the beginning parentheses, we also need to add in ending parentheses. We'll go to the check mark, find the fill handle, and click and drag down. And now it is so much easier to see that while most everyone has paid, here is the person who has only made a partial payment. Now let's look at another example where I looked at 2 local grocery stores, and I just looked at their probably sale prices of some of their produce, and I just sort of randomly typed everything in. And I thought, well, you know what? I would like to know, even in combination, what I would pay for bananas if I wound up going to both stores. I would like to see what I would pay if I went to both stores, and in both stores I found bananas. Now the thing is, I have this random list, and I don't really want to sort it. I don't want to have to play with all of the information here in column A and B. I just want Excel to find the bananas and add up the numbers. Can it do that? Well, it can using SumIF. And we're going to expand SumIF a little bit from what we did before. So in E2, we're going to figure out what the sum of the bananas would be. So we'll go back up to formulas above the ribbon, and we'll go to recently used since we did use it before, and we'll say SumIF. Now, what is the range where we are going to look for banana? Well, that would be A2 through A19. And then what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for banana. Now, keep in mind, banana is text, so I need to put quotes around that word. Now, this is what is interesting. What is the sum range? So even though I am looking for banana here in column A, the sum range are the actual cells to sum. Oh, so I can go through B2 through B19 for the sum range, and then click OK. And it tells me that if I buy a banana from each store, that would cost me 46 cents. And sure enough, here's banana 25 cents plus 21 is 46 cents. Now, maybe this is a sort of nonsensical example, but it shows how you can take a fairly random list and then find what relates to that random list and sum the numbers together. Well, what if we want to find all of the items in column A that are less than $1.25 and even add those up? Well, we could do that. So let's do another SumIF. We'll go to recently used, SumIF. What is the range? Well, in this case, I'm not looking for specific names. I'm just looking for amounts. So my range here is B2 through B19. One more. My mouse kind of popped there. And what is the criteria? Well, less than $1.25. And I don't really have a sum range this time. We'll click OK. And it says, so if we were to add all of the items together, that their cost is less than $1.25, like cucumber here, what else? The green bell pepper, the avocado, the apple, and the cucumber again, well, that I would pay $5.10. But this is amazing how it can find just seemingly random things and find what I am specifically looking for and give me a total. Looking back at what we've looked at today, we've looked at if, looking at those team scores and saying, yes, we won based on criteria. And if we didn't have a win, we simply put in a blank. And then we went to the event planning where we did some counting if, and again, you simply say, I want to count a particular value if it matches this criteria, and we counted y's for our first example, and then we counted y's and n's, and then we even counted y's here as well. And then we said, well, but we might also need to sum some of the information here. So we said, well, we're going to sum this information if it meets this criteria, and if it doesn't, then we're going to do this other thing. So always CountIF, SumIF, if. You set up your criteria, you say what you're going to do if the cell meets that criteria and if it doesn't meet that criteria. So these, for the most part, all have three pieces that you need to determine how you want to fill them out. But these can expand the ability of your spreadsheet so much and give you so many great tools that you can use to expand your knowledge of what's in the spreadsheet and help people understand the data that is in it. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online learning for such great resources as Universal Class, Learning Express Library, LinkedIn Learning, and Udemy Business. We also premiere videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. If you miss a video premiere, you'll still be able to find it later when it's convenient for you. You can find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, and you can find us on YouTube by going to our MCPL MO channel.